right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. We are so excited to welcome you back to day 2 of Discover ADAC, Design ADAC. Oh my gosh, Discover's in the fall. Sorry about that, y'all. Sometimes these things just roll off my tongue. I'm Katie, I'm the general manager here at ADAC. Welcome back. Of course, before we get started, I always like to do a little housekeeping. Reminder to pick up a copy of the event guide. It's in the back on the tables next to the magazines. In this event guide, you'll find all of the events this week. If you're not registered for something that you want to attend, be sure to go ahead and register for it, as many of our events are selling out. If you have any questions or need help, our team is here on hand and can help you with anything that you need. I also want to remind everyone that in this event guide, you can find all of the social media handles for our speakers, our media partners, our showroom sponsors, and of course, ADAC. Our handle is at ADAC Atlanta, and the hashtag that we're using this week is Design ADAC. So please interact with us on social media and have some fun. We always love seeing all of the posts and the reels and everything that y'all are doing. So interact with us and have some fun. Of course, I want to thank our media partner today, that's Veranda. I want to thank our showroom sponsor for this presentation, which is Julian Chichester. Don't forget that we will go to Julian Chichester's showroom right after this presentation for a book signing with Lewis, and that's Suite 139. And I kind of have to say really quickly that I'm so excited about this presentation. This is a fan moment for me. When we found out that Lewis was coming, I couldn't believe it. We were pinching ourselves. So y'all are in for a real treat. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Steele Marcoux, who is the editor-in-chief of Veranda.
Thank you so much, Katie, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Similar to Katie, I am a huge personal fan of Lewis's and couldn't be more thrilled to get to interview him and have a conversation with him on stage today for all of you. We are going to leave about 10 minutes at the end for questions, so please be thinking about your questions as we are talking. Hopefully you already even have some. And I'll turn it over at the right time to you all for those questions. Without further ado, I'd love to welcome Lewis Miller to Atlanta. Lewis, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Steele. It's so good to be back.
And in the spirit of these kinds of things, you really need no introduction, but I'm going to give you one anyway. Lewis, as many of you, probably all of you know, is a fantastic floral and event designer based in New York City and Palm Beach. And I had the great pleasure of working on a story for our November-December 2021 issue that featured his former home in the Hudson Valley. Lewis is now splitting time between New York City and Palm Beach. He has become more recently known for his guerrilla-style art installations around New York City called flower flashes, though, and this is something that I followed personally during the pandemic, and being very far away from New York City, it was actually quite uplifting for me as well. I'm sure many of you followed along as well, and now he has this beautiful book with the same title, Flower Flash, and we're going to be talking a little bit about how the Flower Flash came into being, and of course his book and his career. So without further ado, let's get started. This is your very first, actually this is not your first Flower Flash, is it?
No, that's about number 53.
53, okay.
Who's counting?
But who's counting?
That's our first phone booth flash. It's one of the very few phone booths left in Manhattan. There's actually, I think, 3 working phone booths left in New York City. And this one has been preserved so perfectly well that it almost looks, people have accused us of bringing in a prop.
Oh, that's
the way it's
hysterical.
wedged in there between the mailbox and the light post, but it's actually on West End Avenue. It's a functioning phone booth.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, we're not looking at your first, but I am curious, when you first started this idea, first of all, let's remind us when you did your first Flower Flash.
The first one was October of 2016.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're going on, 5 years now?
That's amazing.
6 years. Yeah.
And did you have any idea what the response would be when you did that first one?
No, I mean, it was, honestly, I thought it was a little bit of a folly, and if people liked it, great. If not, no big deal, because nobody was paying for it, so it didn't matter.
And for our audience's sake, let's remind everybody, kind of what was your thinking behind the Flower Flash, and what really inspired you to do that first one?
Yeah, I mean, it was probably 8 or 10 years of an idea that had been percolating in the back of my brain. You know, so I grew up in Central California, farm country. I went to school and lived for 7 years in Seattle, which was like the horticulture capital of the world. So I was always around flowers, plants, nature. Moved to New York, it's like the concrete jungle. So flowers, I really quickly discovered, are kind of the biggest luxury. You know, that's why the Central Park, the parks of New York are so essential, because they are that little outlet of nature. And I always, you know, as much as I've always been a fan, and I still am, of a very sort of classical approach to beauty, there was this kind of side of me that always did like that contrast of the street art, you know, as like as pretty as the events at the New York Public Library or something at the Plaza is. I find this strange attraction to the chain link fence, the graffiti, the construction site. And it was like, what if there's a way to sort of clash those two things together? So that was something that had just been a passing thought for years. Combine that with this moment I had about 8 years, no, actually it would probably have been closer to 10 years ago. It was a Friday afternoon. I was walking back from my studio in the East Village. I had an armful of flowers left over from the week, taking them home. I was going past traffic that was getting off foot traffic that was getting off of the subway. They all had that kind of like dead look in their eyes. They were coming from their midtown cubicle offices. I was leaving. And it really struck me how people would look at this armful of flowers, and it was just like, it was like this look of desire, this hunger. You know, and it was like, and then it's like, get on a subway with a big armful of blow-on open peonies, and that's like, you don't have to sing a song or do a dance. You just have to do that.
Walk with flowers.
Yeah, and it just reminded me, it's like, you know, people really are starved for that, and I'm taking this for granted. After a while, it becomes like the wallpaper. It's just something in your life every day. So that was kind of piece number 2. And then piece number 3 was, fast forward maybe 6 or 7 years later, business going well, no complaints other than maybe a little bored, you know.
Meanwhile, over the top, high-end, extremely
high-end
luxurious
social events. You know, my you know, and I'll probably reference this again, but like I've always, my comfort zone has always been under the radar, and I'd managed for 14 years to develop a business and do high-end events, but kind of stay out of the limelight. So it was fabulous, and I loved it. But this was the onset of Pinterest and social media, and was mostly Pinterest was real. I'm sorry, not Pinterest, Instagram was really starting to take on, and it was sort of like suddenly everything that I've always loved and would search magazines for in the olden days was everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is something new to look at? Like, business is going good, I'm a little bored, I'm also getting older, and what's my way of like giving back in a way that feels kind of very relevant to my DNA and what I love? So take that long-winded saying, take all those like 3 things together, and it's like, let's try something silly out. If it works, great. If not, no skin off, you know, off our teeth, so.
Right. Okay, I'm concerned the slides might be slightly out of order. Forgive me, guys. I don't know if I'm gonna get, okay, I'm ruining
That's
it.
okay, we can just, you know.
We will get to the first one
Yeah.
at some point in the presentation, and I'll call it out because I have it very clearly in my head. But let's talk a little bit about, you know, you one thing that's very important to you, and I'll click to the next one, but you're sort of in constant pursuit of beauty, right? And
so, I think that's a fair assessment.
and to your previous description, you know, you were surrounded by it day in, day out in your field, in your profession. Why is beauty so important, and particularly on a street corner?
I think it's just that hunger for, you know, I don't know. I think we all have this hunger for beauty, and for some it manifests in whether it's music or it's performing arts. For me, I'm a visual creature, and it's nature. And, you know, and then you combine that in this day and age of this need for authenticity, because we're all addicted and we have no attention span anymore, and we've got the little black mirror, and this was kind of a counterbalance to like, well, is there that moment that can be larger than life when you least expect it? that's actually real, but it's very ephemeral. It's not going to last very long.
I love that.
Of course, social media and the phone captures it, and that's why we're even here having this discussion.
Sure.
Because, you know, that's how it lives in this universe.
That's how you can share it.
That's how you can share it, yeah.
Specifically here, we're looking at a trash can flash.
No, you're looking at a waste bin.
Oh, excuse me, a waste bin flash.
So, you know, everything has its proper name these days, and especially in New York. And I learned this after going to the Department of Sanitation, thinking that we would be greeted with, you know, fanfare and open arms, because we were considering a collaboration. They're like, oh yeah, we know who you are.
Oh my goodness.
Like, first of all, let's give you a lesson. They're not called garbage collectors. They're called, I forgot. Like sanitation workers, yes. They're not called garbage cans. They're waste bins. Like, okay, so we find ourselves always referring to the, oh, well, we're doing a waste bin. So that's a waste bin. That, and when we see the other flashes, I'll go back and forth and cross-reference. But the waste bin flash, let's call it the trash can flash. Let's call it what it is. The trash can flash was one of it kind of manifested itself a little later in the game. It was probably not until 4 or 5, maybe 10 flashes in that happened. And it started in a way that I was having that classical New York moment in the middle of the afternoon, crossing the street, needed to throw a piece of garbage out. You couldn't because the whole thing is overflowing and it's disgusting and it's like garbage all over the ground, spilling. And I just kind of looked at it like, what if the garbage were flowers? So I went in and talked to my team and talked to Rini about it, and she's like, no, we don't want to associate your work with garbage. I'm like, let's just give it a try. Like, it could be fun. Like, I don't care what perceptions are.
I can see why she might say that, however.
Like, I know, but like, who cares? Like, you know, it sounds fun. That's the contrast, yeah. So, and we may come up to it, but the first trash can one, and these tend to be everybody's favorites, and they're kind of the most fun to do because they're so iconic New York. But the first one was very low, and the flowers tended to look like garbage. But as I continued to do them, I realized that this classical netted container, which they're disappearing now because they're replacing them with like the ones that don't allow the rats in, which I guess is good, but they're not as attractive in my mind.
Yeah, right.
Conducive to flower flashes. See what I find attractive. They became a great vessel. It became like an urn on the street corner. So suddenly, like, I went up with him, and it became about the waste bin being a vessel as opposed to the flowers being trash. So we did a full 360, 180 actually. This one here was, so usually the whole idea with the flower flash is that they are flowers for the people. I have fun doing these things, but whatever happens, happens. It's not like it may last a minute, it may last an hour, but if people come and take a picture, but they're welcome to take the flowers. Like, this is my gift. Like, I enjoy flowers, I want you to enjoy flowers, so if you can take a picture, take a flower, take some home, whatever.
That's so wonderful.
This one was great fun because it lasted all day until we realized that we did it in Chinatown and that white flowers represent death.
Oh no.
We're like, really interesting, nobody's taken.
Nobody wanted any of those
They're
flowers.
very respectful. No, they were like walking around it.
Yeah, like no pictures, no selfies.
No, but we're like, wow, it looks so good with the yellow and the red and the bright colors. Like,
That's
white's
amazing.
the natural color, so.
How do you pick the locations of these? And did you have to work in advance with the sanitation department?
No, we never asked permission.
Beautiful.
Just forgiveness.
Beautiful.
And we go back and clean up. That's kind of our, like, we'll always leave it better than when we left it. But, so Irene, who I mentioned, she's my scout. I brought her on right before the flash, and this whole idea of doing this kind of passion project had been kicking around in my brain for a while, but my staff is busy, and they're like, the last thing they're like, you know, I could just roll in their eyes like, why do we have to do this?
Free installation.
We're trying to keep up with the paying jobs. Like, you're asking us, like, this is foolish. So I brought her, I'm like, listen, these are my ideas. Let's talk about this. I need you to be my taskmaster because it's easy to have great ideas. It's even easier in the hustle of life and business to wake up and it's 6 months later and nothing's happened.
Right.
So she actually became my scouting mistress, and she had a brand new baby at the time, and the joke was, and it kind of still is, you look on her phone and it's 90% trash cans, 10% her kid.
That's hilarious. That is hilarious.
So, and when I'm out in the city, they're primarily New York. We've done a few in other cities, but they're a New York thing. The location is very, it's crucial because I want you to look at the image and instantly know you're in New York. So whether it's shot and you see the Chrysler building in the background, or you see a fabulous Stanford White Belle Epoque sort of architecture on Upper East Side, or if it's, it's the things like the subway station, or like we find these graphic walls actually strangely beautiful. So when it comes time to do a flash, when the energy's right, she'll scroll through her phone and we'll look at something and print a bunch out and choose one.
Assess.
Yeah, assess.
I'm realizing that the slides are a little out of order, so forgive me, guys. We're going to bounce around a little bit, but I'm going to linger on this one a minute because it's in front of Casa Magazines, which is obviously a favorite spot of Team Veranda. But I'm also curious, what time of day are we talking here? Do you have to get the trash can or waste basket prior to it being,
so
when it's empty?
That's ideal, but it doesn't always happen.
Yeah, that not.
So it needs to be dark, but depends on the time of the year, obviously. I want to do it at that right time, so right when we're finishing up, the daylight is starting to come, so we can catch the picture before the mob hit it.
Yep.
Generally, it's 5 to 6-ish, 4:30 if we're really strapped. Yeah, and we get there and assess the can and hope that the Department of Sanitation has already made the rounds. Sometimes they haven't, so we've been known many times to be emptying full garbage cans, and they're dripping. It's glamorous, it's very glamorous. And positioning it in the right way, and then doing my thing.
Love it.
Yeah.
Anything else to add about this one in particular?
This one was fun, because Casa Magazine is, being a magazine, and the magazine business being a magazine junkie, New York is known, and that's one of the first things I loved about New York is it has amazing magazine shops. And this one is above and beyond. You can find all the European tomes that you can't necessarily get anywhere else. But this was a fun one, and I was kind of channeling my inner sort of Tony Duquette meets,
I love it.
the urban jungle with these palm fronds and the manzanita branches and the bananas, and so yeah, it was kind of an aggressive beauty.
I love it, aggressive beauty.
Yeah, we do a sunflower flash every year. It tends to be our Van Gogh. This is Van Gogh on the Bowery, as we nicknamed it.
Love it.
This was one we did during the. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is gonna bring up a whole another topic. Let me see. I'm gonna try to click through and finish up our wastebasket series. I love
that one was real quick. That was the leftovers from the Downton Abbey premiere.
Oh, wow.
And I love this image so much because you've got this. I love silhouettes. I've always loved silhouettes, whether it's like a classic Victorian silhouette or a John Robb or a Hugo Guinness painting.
Totally.
Or an urn on a fence with the light shining behind it. But then this one, you've got the black fire hydrant, the black poodle.
I love it.
The one-way sign and the rose window. And then it's I loved how this composition came out.
I think that's such an important, I'm getting ahead of myself, important component of this, and there's an image that we will get to at some point, where you're very intentional about the surrounding environment as well, and the palette that factors into it. And there are variables that are beyond your control in a city. Yeah. And yet you pull that off.
And that's what I love about it, because it's a very guttural, I really try not to plan these too far in advance, because then it doesn't have the same energy. You want that guttural reaction. You want that sort of design on the fly.
Yeah, that's
spontaneity.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So let's go back a few. Well, we can linger here for a moment, but tell us about what's going on here, because it's obvious. It's clear you are outside of a hospital here.
We're outside of a hospital. So this was in April of 2020. And we had started we were in lockdown, we had started our flower flash boxes, which was this kind of like quick pivot to make some money because
Events were not happening.
gone. Payroll still had to happen. And we started to ship flowers from Holland direct to people's doors.
Oh, that's amazing.
And then, so I would choose a selection of things. We'd do little homemade videos in my kitchen. People would order them. Then they would get a link and they would see how to take these flowers direct from Holland. And they would be, you know, as we get them in the market, they would still have the paper wrapped around them. Some would be broken. You'd have to hydrate them and get a lesson on basically how to arrange flowers from soup to nuts.
That is so great.
So it ended up being really well. It was doing really well. It was a lot of fun. And we worked with American Express on this one and did this, and all the proceeds went to the hospital workers. And so it felt really good because in the middle of 6 weeks, 8 weeks into this madness, we raised $50,000 for charity.
Incredible.
And so we did the boxes, but we kicked it off with this flower flash, which we did outside of the hospital. Now this was fun and funny because that guy there in the background with the mask on watched us from the beginning as we set up our presentation. We set up this installation. And this is not, like, it takes a little time.
Yeah.
And it's, it's a little frenetic, and it's also a little bit of a balancing act. Like,
You guys roll up in a van.
we roll up in a van, and I take a big chunk of garland and looped it up the lamppost and took some big balls of chicken wire and grapevine and zip tied them kind of these orbs at the base, and then it's just about shoving flowers in. It's like,
Right.
it's fast and dirty.
Fast and furious.
Fast and furious. And we were just then finishing up, sweeping up, stepping back to take a picture, and he saunters over and he's like, you can't have that there. It needs to go 10 feet that way. And this is on private property. I'm like, okay, well, you could have told us, and this doesn't exactly just get moved. So
Right.
we took our picture, we took it away, took all the flowers back to the studio.
Oh my God.
But then we put them all in bud vases, made bouquets, gave them to the hospital workers. They were happy. It was fun. We raised money for charity, so it felt good.
All was well. but
All was
still.
well, but good timing,
Craziness.
bud.
I know. Jumping around a little bit, let's go back to the Heart series. I want to ask you about kind of your love letter to NYC.
Yeah, so the hearts, the first heart we did was on Valentine's Day a couple years ago. This series here we did when New York sort of reopened on June 23rd, and I did 4 of them throughout the city. I like the hearts because they feel like big emojis.
Totally.
And they also, the classic I Heart New York logo in the shopping bag, and it's kind of a spin on that. So these are fun because they're big grapevine hearts, about 6 feet tall. We make them in the studio, load them on the truck, then just literally lean them against something, zip tie them, freshen them up, and adios.
I love it.
Yeah.
There's I'm picking up on some irony here with no turns.
Yeah,
Whether intentional or not.
I love myself a street sign, so you'll see a lot of those, and there's a little tongue-in-cheek, action happening. This was one we zip tied to a subway stop, and so really taking in this amazing street art behind with the doves and the graphics. So you've got the old New York, the new New York, you've got the flowers. There's just so many things happening, and it just becomes a really fabulous image.
The role that graffiti plays in several of your installations, I think, is really interesting, and we'll probably come upon this. I'm going to skip this for a second. I'm going to save some of that. But okay, well, let me skip that one too. This is one where I wanted to talk about palette. I love this palette.
That's a smokestack, or steam. Yeah, they call them smokestacks. I don't think they have a politically correct name. I'd have to ask a different department probably. But you see these all through Manhattan. They come up through the manholes and for construction, and I've always found them kind of playful, and they feel like big chess pieces. And then this one had this amazing arrow sign.
I love it.
So this was a very cold, February or March day, and it was so cold. And so we just took these super bright ultraviolet and blue hydrangeas and just did this kind of crescendo wave around it.
I love it.
And it really is about that like play of color, you know, because the backdrop is very New York, but the backdrop isn't all that interesting. You got the Renaissance sign, you got a Starbucks coffee, but the actual elements themselves are so graphic that it holds its own.
And let's talk a little bit about kind of volume here, because that looks like a lot of hydrangeas.
Yeah, it is.
So, I mean, how many flowers go into something like this?
It's hard to say. I would say anywhere between 1,000 to 10,000 stems, depending on.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I've always been a little. I think I have scarcity issues. So more has always been more.
You believe in abundance.
Abundance is my middle name.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Okay.
There we go.
We have arrived. This is the first flash. So I'd love to hear from your thoughts. I know a little bit about this, and if you have Lewis's book, you can learn more, but why here, and where are we?
So this is the John Lennon Memorial in Central Park. This is, it's called the Imagine Medallion. This was October of 2016. 2 days prior, I had done one of those flower walls at the Hearst Center.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and it was there in the lobby for Good Girls Revolt premiere.
I could totally picture it.
And it was all these hot, you know, it was just dahlias and carnations. And the guys broke it down. They were bringing it back, bringing these they had thrown them all in clear garbage bags and were dragging them in. And we're like, wow, those look so amazing. These clear bags are just flowers. Like, well, this is the time, if ever, to do something like this. Now, backtrack. The night before this, we had just had probably one of the most horrendous political debates that affected everybody across the board. Now, we do not get political. I have a very firm, but after that, whatever your viewpoints, everybody was left raw.
You were aware of the mood, the national mood.
Yeah, the mood was cynical, to say the least. So we're like, now's the time to do it. Cue Arini, and she had been, you know, her iPhone. We found this one, like, let's do it. Let's get up and do it in the morning. And this was just literally, there were no mechanics. It was just these leftover flowers done in a halo. We thought, you know, had no idea if it would last for a minute or a day.
I mean, could a breeze sweep these away? Okay.
Because they were pretty heavy. The flowers had some weight to them.
Okay.
But other things could sweep it away, because a few minutes later, a little man in his little green park cart, his park cart, came up with his broom. And we're like, well, this is the beginning and the end. Yep. But he was actually very sweet. He was very respectful, and he just brushed all the leaves away. And this one, because it was in October, lasted for almost 4 days.
Oh, wow.
And it was great, because this is already a very photographed tourist attraction. Yeah. So we instantly saw people would rearrange the flowers. They would put their dog in the middle. They would take the flowers, turn it into a peace sign. They made it into a smiley face, whatever.
That's amazing.
So it was fun. It felt good, and it was like people were interacting with flowers and enjoying it. And,
I love that.
That was kind of mission accomplished.
Do you often have the opportunity to reuse flowers in this way?
As much as possible. That's kind of how it started. You know, ideally, if I can't use them from events, then I try to use as many flowers from my vendors that have lost their peak, they're past their peak, and they're not going to sell them.
Right.
So it's those buckets of flowers in the cooler that are, you know, going to be shot in a few days. So we take those. At this point, you know, my need for abundance and the need for it to look good, I just do what we have to do to fulfill it. That's the first.
That's the first trash flash.
Trash flash, yeah. So you can tell the flower. It wasn't one of these like 10-foot tall arrangements. It was flowers tumbling up, like I had just seen trash the day prior.
I love it. I love it. And I think there is a tie though to that, because that. And you kind of go into this in your book, but the notion of you sort of doing these beautiful, very high-end, luxurious event installations that the next day someone's dismantling or taking apart, and the sort of ephemeral quality to that beauty if it can have, you're getting people to think about it, seeing it in a trash can, but also if you can find another use for that material.
It feels great because,
Yeah.
there's so much, I'm not going to say there's waste in our industry because
Sure.
the flowers have done their job.
Yeah.
They've given a lot of other people jobs, they've done what they needed to do. But a lot of times they go into the trash, quite literally, and they're still very beautiful. So
Right.
if we can put them in the trash in this way.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I also love it. It's a little clearer in this photo, but I love the way you sign your installations and actually, you've been called the Banksy of floral design. I think it was the New Yorker who called you that. But there's this sort of signature that's really kind of cool.
So we tag them all. It's LMD times NYC, so Lewis Miller Design times New York City. This is, everybody asks, this is not done in spray paint. It's done with spray chalk. So it actually washes away. We, try not to vandalize anything.
In a permanent way.
In a permanent way, yeah.
Try.
Try.
Oh, this is an incredible one. Tell us a little bit about this one.
This was fun. This was a really crummy post office on 14th Street and 8th Avenue that actually, about a week after this, Banksy actually did an installation over it.
Right.
Somebody tried to steal it and became a whole thing. This post office is no longer exist, and it was an eyesore. Like you can see, it was pretty, it was pretty gross. But Tory Burch contacted us a couple of days prior. They had just had their fashion show at the Brooklyn Museum and had done these sort of fields of pink carnations. They're like, we have 10,000 pink carnations. Do you want them? We're like, sure.
That's
Carnations
amazing.
are great because you throw them in a box, they're tough as nails. We'll
They can
figure out something to
withstand.
do with them. So this was sort of like a homage to the underloved pink carnation, which is still a very classic Valentine's Day flower. The post office, the bundles of cardboard that almost look like bundles of letters, and then this juxtaposition of flowers and stripes against that sort of chaotic warning, keep out sign, poison.
It's so great.
People enjoying them, taking them. It becomes full-on carnage, let me tell you. Once one person starts taking it, it's just like, whoa.
And do you send Irene, but do you have someone sort of stationed to kind of see what happens?
Irene
Throughout the day.
stays.
You got to get out.
I get the hell out of Dodge.
gotta
I just
disappear.
no, I do it and I usually head to the gym.
I love it.
Because it's sort of like when it's done for me, I've done it, whatever happens after that, I don't need to stick around to see it. It's fun to see it on social media, but
Sure.
after that, for me, it's always what's the next one?
Right.
So she stays around and talks to people and gets some of the reactions.
That Heartbreaker T-shirt with the carnation is incredible. So now we're getting kind of back to the pandemic and sort of your tribute to the healthcare workers, and talk to us a little bit more about that.
So it was really interesting because, obviously I'd started these in 2016 and they became very poignant and necessary in 2020.
Yeah.
I was up at my house in the Hudson Valley. We had closed up shop, everything, looking at a very full year that suddenly went from full to zilch. And we're like, this isn't going to work well for me to not be doing something. So I would, after about 2 weeks of sitting around doing nothing, I got back in the car and drove down to the city. And I actually, strangely, had a great time because the city was empty. And you could drive from lower Manhattan all the way to the upper, in 12 minutes.
Oh my God.
And the city was immaculate because there was no people, so there were no garbage. Right. And then in April, all the flowers started blooming, and there was no trash in it, nobody knocked broken things. It was it had that, I felt like I was in the movie Vanilla Sky where Tom Cruise is going through Times Square and it's completely empty, and it's trippy and surreal. Yeah. But I knew we needed to do the flashes more than ever and do them in ways for people to enjoy them without necessarily congregating around them, because we didn't know what we know now.
That's
but,
right.
You risk
sort of
there's
bringing.
an attraction. Yeah. So This was obviously the one we did with American Express, but prior to that, we'd done a series of cherry branch arrangements and put them outside of the hospitals for all the healthcare workers to see. That was after we had taken the flowers back to the studio and they brought them back. They were so happy. It's amazing how flowers just cheer people up.
I mean, this photo says it all.
It's so sweet.
Nothing like a lilac.
That was flash number 2.
Oh, this is flash 2.
That's the second one, Alice in Wonderland
Wonderland.
garland, in Central Park.
I love this.
Yeah, that was quite a decadent boa of flowers.
And then this is, no, you go.
No, you first. You're leading it. I don't.
Well, tell us a little bit about the types of flowers you use to create this.
So I try to use what's seasonal or what looks the best. This was kind of fabulous because it was peony season. We were getting local peonies and we still had some local azaleas. So what's kind of more extravagant than throwing, peonies, AKA floral caviar, on top of a pile of rocks?
I mean, it just feels decadent,
Yeah,
the same way that caviar does.
It was pretty decadent. Now, what's interesting about this flash is we had a completely different location planned for this one. And it was this amazing little nook in Soho that had great graffiti, like really beautiful graffiti. And we went the day before, or 2 days before, to check it out, make sure it was still there, look at the size for proportions. Showed up that morning, and overnight they had wheat pasted like a Disney poster or something.
Oh my God.
So it suddenly became very commercial. It was all gone. So we had to drive around a little bit and figure out what to do. This was this is like plan C, so it worked out well.
The pile of rocks is great. You've got like sort of varying heights.
Those are those like slabs of granite that they redo the West Village streets sidewalks in. So they were just perched there by the phone booth.
And how often does that happen, that you have this sort of change of plans that,
That was actually the first. Usually not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We're sort of in book territory. So on that note, I'm going to, pardon me guys, while I go back to some of these illustrated pages. Because so now, the Flash, we've kind of walked through its origins, and then it's, it's kind of peaking, and then you get to the pandemic, and you do this tribute to New York, and you decide to chronicle the whole experience in a book. And it's a really beautiful book.
Thank you.
And I kind of wanted to linger on this image for a minute to ask you about the design of the book and why what's so powerful about taking this contemporary trash flash image and pairing it with these historic botanical renderings?
With this book, I wanted to somehow get a little glimpse into my head. And that, the terms I use a lot are things that in my world, there's a lot of juxtaposition, there's a lot of duality. If there's something fancy, there's something, cheap. If there's pedestrian. If there's raw, there's something refined. If it's polished, then there's something rough. If it's light and dark. And I think that tension to me is what makes things interesting. So I've always loved and been a huge fan of sort of the Dutch master paintings and those floral paintings, and they didn't really exist because they were painted over a series of months or a year, because at that point peonies weren't blooming at the same time as lilies, or whatever, or hyacinths. So they would put them in. So you never really saw it. It didn't exist. And then it's like, and now, with the Flash, it's sort of like, well, this is kind of a little bit like a modern day, these flowers all do exist, but why are they existing here in this bustling metropolis that's kind of smelly and garbage and graffiti and rats and noise and concrete and chaos? Sounds like I really love New York. But, it's like there's nothing more sort of ephemeral and precious than flowers because they have such a short lifespan. So with the book, it's sort of like all these things that don't necessarily have any cohesion. And yet, yes, I love an engraving, a Flemish engraving, as much as I love a graffitied wall or something even simpler, a black and white stripe of a crosswalk.
I love it.
Or with an orange parking cone next to it. So the book is kind of a tapestry of a lot of those elements that don't necessarily go together, but you can see how that kind of informs how I piecemeal this quilt of stuff together.
Well, it's really great too because you do write your own story, but then you present these sort of visual, as you said, sort of a window into your head. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of nice to have the background straight from you, first
Yeah.
person, and then you get into these pages and it's just this sort of richness and visual, profusion of ideas coming together.
Yeah, this was a fun one. This was the day before I went on vacation to Tuscany. But it's also, I'm very democratic with my use of flowers, and the unfashionable, what we call the unfashionable and the unloved flowers are just as important, if not more important, than the caviar flowers.
Sure.
It's kind of funny because it is a little bit like New York. In New York, you've got the worker bees and you've got the people keeping the city together, and then you have those driving around in town cars and helicoptering to the Hamptons. And these flower flashes, you've got the carnations, you've got the gladiolas, you've got the chrysanthemums, and they're elevating that butterfly ranunculus or the
Right.
lily of the valley or the sweet pea. It's like, without them, that sweet pea wouldn't exist. Nothing would be there to hold it up. So
That's amazing.
the sunflower, love them or hate them, it can be a pedestrian flower, but in August, they're amazing. They're graphic. We just lopped all their heads off and just threw them out there like floral graffiti. And again, it's that working with the sort of, cage of the barriers and the cones.
I love it. And then there's these references to sort of these roots and bulbs and critters.
And the critters and the bees and the botanical elements. Yeah.
It's really great. Let me see if I can get back to some of the book pages. This is fun jumping around through it. And then here with the Dutch master painting. I'd never considered that it wouldn't actually exist because none of those flowers
Yeah,
were
so
available
looking
at
at
the
that
same
Dutch
time.
mess on the left, you've got that pheasant eye daffodil that's right there in the middle. You've got the tulip shooting up, the anemone. Well, those bloom at entirely different times than the bachelor button, the dianthus, and the cabbage roses. So they were all painted in at different periods.
And they wouldn't have had
And they
modern
wouldn't have-
refrigeration or
No,
shipping.
they didn't have any of that. So nobody ever saw those flowers together at any given time.
Fascinating.
Nowadays, we can.
That's fascinating. I love the graphic treatment of the spread with the patterning.
Yeah, again, that's sort of my love of repetition. Like that's a beautiful vintage French wallpaper, or like a book plate pattern or something. So getting that sort of nod to the historic with the industrial and modern,
It's great.
playful.
Another painting.
The first one in the snow.
And then New York. Before I turn it over for questions, which I will do, you have kind of, talked about sort of the grit and the dirt and the smells and the noise of New York.
Yeah.
But yet, you do love New York.
I do.
The Flash, all really entirely is pretty much a tribute to New York and its various iterations over the 5 years.
Yeah.
What is it that you love so much about New York?
I love the energy. I love the fact that I can do New York has allowed me to do what I do like I don't think any other city in the world does. And it's not because of money, because there's a lot of money everywhere.
Sure.
But it's because in New York, the biggest luxuries, and there's a lot of luxuries in New York, the biggest luxuries are nature and space,
Yeah.
and of which we have not enough of, either one of them.
Right.
I can't do anything about space, but nature, that's where flowers become so significant. They become, whether you live in a palatial apartment or you have a little, railroad studio, whether you get them at Trader Joe's, you get them at the farmer's market, you have a posh florist deliver them, they change the energy of a space. That day walking down the gritty East 12th Street, going against the commuter traffic, and seeing that just like hunger, because flowers are a luxury. And I wanted to give that back and take what I love, which is flowers, and how flowers can, not only are you looking at flowers, but they can help you look at a room, a space, or even a city differently. They do have this ability to change your viewpoint, to change the energy, to change the perspective. and give people, I wanted to give people an alternative to that black mirror that we are glued to.
Amazing. Well, it's incredible, and thank you so much for sharing some insights into your process and what you do. And love to take some time for questions from the audience. Please don't be shy.
I have a microphone, so let me get to you. Just raise your hand. Who's up first? Somebody over here? There we go.
Hey,
Hi.
you mentioned grapevine being a mechanic.
Yep.
What are some of the other mechanics, especially to get the height?
So, we do a lot of garlands, because if we can zip tie a garland to, say, a lamp pole or some structure, and then I can water tube flowers into that, so that gets me the height. Bamboo poles, and I don't even need water picks, because these don't last long enough. They don't have to be in water, so I've even, like on some of the sunflower flashes to get the height, I've even lopped off a twig and just tape it to a bamboo stick to get it up high. Big orbs of grapevine are great because it acts like a giant flower frog, and it captures the stems, so you can holds everything together. Or branches, like 6 foot tall camellia branches, cherry branches. I'll start with I'll start a trash bin with an armload of branches, and then I can just build onto that. So it's a little tricky, and there's been times when, especially in the beginning, when you didn't get the balance right, and suddenly, one stiff breeze came by and the whole thing blew over, or because they can be top heavy very quickly because you don't have a base full of water or heavy bricks of floral foam or something to weight it down. So it's a bit of a balancing act. Yeah.
All right, Wayne, hold on.
So you don't put anything down in the trash can?
Not inside. I'm taking stuff out with rubber gloves on, and then nowadays I'll just take a big wad of grapevine and shove it in there, and that just acts like and then I can add my branches. But also for the perspective, I don't want it to feel dense. You want to be able to see, it's part of the visual as well, to be able to see the sign, but also see the wire netting of the can. And if you put a bunch of heavy leaves in there, you're going to lose that vantage point.
Yeah, even there you can see the can.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to her, then here.
That had snow in it, I think.
I'm going to go here, then here, then here.
I could just ask this, but they're recording. So as an interior designer,
Yeah.
hearing you talk about juxtaposition, all of that is very familiar to me, and I feel a sense of understanding. But you shared that you're doing this at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. How are you seeing your work?
Well, sometimes you don't. And if you see it on Instagram, like, huh.
It's not quite what I pictured.
No, but actually, that's a good question. And this is what I have to say, this is what's fun about them. Because in the olden days, before the iPhone, doing in 2004 when I did the Veranda Floral story,
Yeah.
or I would be shooting with my friend Don Freeman, who's an amazing photographer. He shot my first book, and we would do these, or working with Martha Stewart back when they had, doing flower stories for the magazine. It was doing beautiful images was a fun but excruciating process.
Polaroids.
Getting the light right, Polaroids. You'd sit there with tweezers, you'd look at a Polaroid, you'd step back because, of course, of what you're seeing versus what the camera sees are two entirely different things. And, and sometimes you'd have great days, or you'd have these days where you'd work for 5 hours on one image, but suddenly the light was right and you could bang 12 more out right after that. This is the exact opposite of that. This is there are no fine tuning. This is handfuls of flowers. This is just completely guttural. It's spontaneous. This is what I love about it. It's not supposed to be perfect. There's no way it can be perfect. But I kind of have in my mind an idea of where I want the shape to go. I know the elements I'm working with. I've already pre-selected the color scheme, so I know that's going to work, and I know the location. And then, sometimes it kind of happens how I'm thinking, sometimes it doesn't, but it's a lot of fast and furious, every once in a while stepping back. Arini is there with the camera. She's like, just look at this. I'm like, all right, so we got to do a little cutting out here to, it's distracting, or just needs to be a strong visual image. So, but that's, I try to bang these out in 20 to 30 minutes.
That's amazing.
It's very rare that one goes more than a half hour or 45 minutes, because then it stops being a flash and it starts becoming an installation.
You know, I'm so glad you mentioned the word spontaneity. I forgot to add that in as a question, but you mentioned in your book that, and something I've kind of discerned is, you know, there's a lack of spontaneity in so much of what we do in a lot of the design work. There's really a lack.
Well, that's my day job all day
Right.
long. Like, we have meetings to plan the meetings. Like, you know, the difference between an interior designer and an event designer is that, well, we can't kick the can down the road. Everybody's arriving at 7 o'clock, you know, then the party's over. So, like, there's precision. You have to have a plan B and C in your mind, but you have the meeting, you're doing the floor plans, you can sit there and talk about the napkin treatment until you're blue in the face, and it's like, oh, come on already, it's a party. Where this is just like, okay. It's also, as a business owner, you know, you find yourself, the more you're in the, you know, the more you're in the field, or the more successful you are, or however you look at it, you find yourself less actually in the kitchen doing the things that you're supposed to love. You find yourself bogged down with, you know, everything from human resources to keeping clients happy to writing checks. Yep. So this, for me, was like, all right, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. I can get my hands dirty again. I can do these. I've always loved, like, I'd much rather make a big arrangement than a corsage. So these are big, it's fast, it's guttural. And, you know, the thing is, too, it's like, there's no financial transactions. So I don't have to keep anybody happy. If you don't like it,
Amen.
then don't like it on Instagram. Like, I don't know, it's not my problem.
No problem.
Yeah.
Louis, good morning.
Good morning.
Would you like to talk a little bit about your events in New York and West Palm and that whole area in Florida?
Yeah, so I do mostly social events, you know, a lot of parties, weddings in New York. Some corporate. I definitely do more corporate now stuff because of the rise of the flower flash. A lot of people want these, you know, this kind of like more, I don't know, spontaneous approach to flowers, which I love. I do a lot of parties, you know, I'm in Palm, I opened up an office in Palm Beach in November. I moved down there in November. I set it up last summer. And the idea being, as much as I love New York, I can't be there forever. And, you know, I have a business and I've got employees, and I can't just pick up and move. It's gonna be a 4 or 5 year process, but like, where is that next place, you know? And I have a lot of clients down there. The climate's great. It's easy to get to. Like, it's sort of like, this is kind of a no-brainer. So I've been spending most of the winter down there working on events. Coming back to New York, I'm going to be, you know, almost on a weekly basis. I spend a lot of time in the airplane, but you know, it's like, it's also like, I can't sit still for very long. So this works really well for me because I like the juxtaposition. You know, it's like, you know, New York is a little bit like trash and homeless right now, and Palm Beach is jasmine and hedges, but you know, too much of one, you become a little desensitized. So I try to always keep myself on that kind of, that edge of, you know, chaos a little bit. But I'm going to be going back to New York, you know, into May, because we've got a busy summer and fall season, crank out the weddings, the summer parties in the Hamptons, and then go back and well, now I have no time off ever, because now we're doing two seasons. But I think that, you know, I love what I do, and I'm very fortunate because, you know, I get to create, you know, as interior designers, you all understand you're changing spaces, you're changing people's lives, and I feel very lucky because I get to do this for people in very kind of monumental life events. And they're very important times of their lives, and what's nice for me is I can really change a space, whether it's bringing in, hedging walls, trees, designing a dance floor, working with the lighting, furniture, and it's like kind of, for me, it's interior design and garden design at the same time in a space. But what's great about this that you guys don't have the luxury of is it's all over at midnight. And it's in the rearview mirror and on to the next. No, like, you know what, I need a new trash can to match the shower curtain kind of thing. It's like, it's done. But with that, it's also, I felt like I need to find a way to give back and bring in a charitable aspect, because this is obviously something that happens in very cultivated environments, for a very wealthy sector of society, and how to bring that kind of out of the ballroom and into the trash bin, and bringing the decorative arts, bringing that, my love for 17th century painting, and what I could do, some beautiful thing that, 200 people may see, at the Pierre, but like, bring it out for the public to see. So that's, and again, it's like, I like that contrast of, you may spend your days in the ballroom, you spend your nights on the street.
I love it.
Doesn't sound so good, but you know what I'm saying.
I think we had a question over here. Yeah. Do you mind passing that down?
So you mentioned that you got your inspiration from your past,
Yeah.
your foundation from your past. So where do you get your inspiration now to keep things fresh, innovative, and moving forward?
That's always a good question, isn't it? I get my inspiration from the house and garden sector. A lot of florists are like, oh, I'm inspired by fashion or whatever. Like, fashion kind of has always went over my head. And art somewhat, but like, I'm not, I don't look at a Rothko and I'm just enveloped by it. I'd much rather look at a Sargent or something. But, going to Europe or going to England or going to, and even the United States, coming down here and seeing beautiful gardens, seeing beautiful homes, and how the structure and the tension and the play of all the materials, and how to create that sort of, as a designer for a wedding or a party, like how to make it feel as much like an intimate event at home and not feel like a production is always my goal. Films are a huge source of inspiration, especially nothing like a period piece. And actually kind of an obscure sense of inspiration is, not that anybody reads anymore. I used to read all the time. I feel like I don't even know how to anymore. But like these beautiful old novels or books that describe parties.
Oh, yeah.
And I have a few that I've held on to, and one is this book, I can never pronounce his name correctly, Carl Heisman or something, and it's called Against Nature. And he does, have you know that book? He does this scene where he describes this, he threw a dinner party, and it was like the black dinner party, and he encrusted the tortoise full of jewels, and he put soot all over or charcoal all over the white marble paths to make it black, and he put ink in the fountain, and he covered the table in black taffeta with just little nosegays of violets, and it's like, it's so macabre and chic and like fabulous. But then what's fabulous about reading these is that like you're reading the word, but your brain is putting the inspiration together. So it's not like you're looking at something somebody else did and copying or seeking inspiration. It's like you're extracting from the written word, and your brain is putting the puzzle, the visual puzzle together. So that can be a source of inspiration. But in this day and age, it's tricky because suddenly, and I hate to keep referring to the phone, but it just seems to be the blessing and the curse of our life. It's like, and I was even talking to you, like, it's so nice just to, pick up Veranda and look at it, because you stop and you look at the pages, where I find it so easy to fall into the trap of just looking at it on my phone or my iPad, and it reduces everything to a thumbnail. So it can be the most beautiful, exquisite home in the world, but it doesn't look any more special than the 2,000 other images that come before and after. They're all reduced to like just a thumbnail, swipe right kind of thing.
They're all backlit. They're
all
all,
yeah.
to your point, like
Yeah.
you can't really tell what's special until you see it
Yeah.
printed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So So.
Well, I think we're out of time because we want to make sure that we have plenty of time for the book signing. Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
you.
We could sit here for hours, I know. But let's go to Julian Chichester and that's Suite 139. You can go out this direction. We'll do the book signing and we'll visit with Louis a little bit more. So thank you so much, Steele, Louis,
Thank you.
Miranda.
Thank you all. Thank you.